Okay guys, today we're going to look at the decay and recycling. We're going to look at the part of the carbon cycle that is the decay process. So what I want you guys to be able to do is this. Now we've done the water cycle and we've done the carbon cycle, but we're going to look how the role of microorganisms fits in with that. So how that helps with the recycling of nutrients. We're going to look at the factors that affect the rate of decay, and then we're going to look at a very specific example where the role of microorganisms can be useful to produce fuel. So let's kick off with a bit of spiral learning, what we have done before, and look at the carbon cycle. So very quickly, we start with the carbon cycle. We look at the carbon in the atmosphere, which is carbon dioxide gas. That's about 0.04% of the air, tiny amount. So what happens to that? That carbon dioxide gets absorbed, some of it in the oceans, but I'm not going to mention that today. But a lot of it gets dragged out of the atmosphere via a process of photosynthesis. So the carbon dioxide gets taken out by plants. What happens to those plants? They get eaten. So there's then the movement of carbon in biomass in animals. So they make animal proteins and fats and various other carbon-based molecules. What's going to happen to those things? Well, eventually they're going to, in the short term, they're going to respire. So we have then upward arrows, whereas they produce their own energy. There's a respiration from all living things, which pushes the carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. But those living things die, and when they do, we then have the decay process. And this is what we're looking at today: decomposers and detritivores. We'll look at both of those. And as they consume dead and decaying matter, they release carbon dioxide via respiration again. So this is the bit we're looking at today. This is the decay cycle. Okay, so photosynthesis makes food, things eat food, things die. There's the decay cycle. But there's a little bit more to it than that as well, because some of those living things, when they die, didn't decompose millions of years ago, and they formed sediment, and that's formed fossil fuels, so gas and oil. I know you did questions on that when we looked at this. And we dig up that gas and oil, and we burn those fossil fuels, and that releases carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. So that's the carbon cycle. That's as much as we want to know. Now there is a slight addendum to this. There's another little bit. Volcanoes release quite a lot of carbon dioxide, so they also put carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere, but that's not part of the cycle we're worried about today. So let's think about how things decay. I've got my dinner there, and what I want to do is I want my dinner to last a little bit longer. I don't want it to decay. Why will it decay? Because decomposing bacteria will start to break it down. It will go off and I won't be able to eat it. It'll make me poorly ever do. So how can we slow down that process? Well, we can slow down that process by making life difficult for those bacteria. So what can we do? Well, one of the easiest things we can do is we can put it in a can. If you put it in a can, what we do there is we heat the food up to a very high temperature, which kills off the bacteria. That means that the bacteria are now dead, their enzymes have been destroyed, and the can is sealed. So no more bacteria can get in, and also no oxygen can get in. So that's an easy way of doing it. Heat them up, kills bacteria. Bacteria like warm conditions, but anything above 40 degrees will cause their enzymes to denature. So hot is bad for them. Another thing we can do is make it too cold for them. If you freeze food, you actually stop the bacteria from being able to reproduce. Some of those bacteria will in fact die because the freezing process causes their cells to expand and they burst, but not all of them. When you defrost the food, the bacteria start to reproduce again, which is why they tend never to refreeze frozen food. So you want a nice warm temperature for bacteria, roughly 38 degrees, because that's sort of optimal temperature for enzymes. Too hot kills them, too cold kills them. Another thing I can do, which is a slightly more old-fashioned way of doing it, is we can dry food. We used to store food by drying it. We used to hang food up by smoking it. We smoked kippers. We dry meat, like beef jerky. We used to keep for a very long time. We dry things like tomatoes. And what that does is that removes water. Bacteria cannot survive if there's no water. It either inactivates them or usually it kills them. So bacteria need a nice warm environment and they need a moist environment. So drying was quite an effective way. How else did we do it? Well, things like fruit we often made jams out of. We preserved it. And we get the fruit and we put it in a nice sugary solution. What that does is it kills the bacteria again, because sugary water, jam, has got a very high concentration of sugar, which means it's a low concentration of water. So osmosis would cause water to move from inside the bacterial cell outwards to the surrounding sugar solution. So it kills the bacteria by osmosis, by drying it out internally. You can do exactly the same thing with salt. Salt is a desiccant, it absorbs water. So we used to salt pork, we used to salt all sorts of fish and meat and various things, and a process called curing it, and that just put enough salt in it that the bacteria were killed. They couldn't survive because of osmosis. Now, obviously we tended to salt savoury food, and we tended to sugar sweet food, because salty jam would be horrible. But that was an old-fashioned way of doing it. Another method we could do was pickling. So we used to put things like onions and eggs and various things in vinegar, and that stopped them decaying as well. That made the pH very acidic, and that inhibits the enzymes in the bacteria, and they either die or they become inactive. When we looked at the ecology part of the module, and we talked about peat bogs and about how peat didn't decay, that's because of their very acidic conditions as well. Bacteria can't cause the plant matter to decay, so that's what peat is. It's plant matter that should have decayed but can't. So what does that tell us? Well, if I want food to decay quickly, what do I want? The optimum conditions for decomposing bacteria are the exact opposite of this. So I want warm but not too hot. I want damp, moist conditions. I don't want it to be too acidic. I don't want it to be too dry using sugar or salt. So that's how we preserve food. These are the factors that affect it. So how do we use microorganisms? How do we break things down? It's worth bearing in mind that there have been living creatures on this planet for millions of years, millions and millions of years, and all of them poo. So the whole planet should be covered in meters of excrement. Where's the meters of excrement that should be covering the whole planet? It's gone. It's not here. It's not here because things break it down. So what things break it down? Well, the microorganisms do. And then we're going to look at the two things. So we've got decomposing bacteria and we've got detritivores. So if you want to be really good and throw away your plant waste sensibly, you can make compost. And compost is where we have all the plant matter and we leave it to decay. Again, optimum conditions are damp and warm, because warm is good for the enzymes, damp is good because the bacteria need moisture. And decomposers break down the plant waste to make compost, and that breaks it down so it can be recycled. As they do so, they will release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere because they will respire. We use microorganisms in sewage plants. When we did the chemistry module, you looked at potable water and looked at breaking down wastewater. We use bacteria for that. So wastewater comes into a sewage plant, and we've got two bits. We've got the effluent, which is the watery bit, and we've got the sort of sludge, which is the pooey, solidy bit, and all the bits of the little loo roll, and they sink to the bottom as a sediment. They are broken down by bacteria, by decomposing bacteria to make them safe. The effluent is then broken down by bacteria in what we call aerobic respiration or aerobic decomposition, and that makes the liquidy part safe to be sort of recycled back. So we chuck water back into the water system that's been had all the chemicals removed by microorganisms, and all the poo has been broken down by microorganisms. We also break down plastics using microorganisms. Certain biodegradable plastics are being produced that can then be recycled by letting the microorganisms munch on them instead of having plastics that last forever. So part of the recycling system is using decomposing bacteria. They will break down the organic matter, they will feast on it, break it down to safer chemicals, and to do that they will aerobically respire. But then we've got detritivores. Now detritivores are organisms that live on detritus. What is detritus? Detritus is dead organic material, dead plants mainly, so dead leaves, dead wood, but to an extent dead bodies. Detritus typically involves the bodies and fragments of dead organisms and also fecal matter. Why is there no poo? Things eat poo. Dung beetles eat poo. So, any organism, any animal that eats detritus, eats decaying or dead organic matter, is a detritivore. So, what things do we include there? Well, things like a lot of insects are. So, worms, they burrow through the ground, or tunnel through the ground, and they basically absorb the soil. And humus is the organic bit in soil. They absorb the soil, and anything they can digest, they do, and out the back is the indigestible stuff. Things like crabs. Crabs are bottom feeders. They walk across the bottom of the ocean, and they eat any decaying matter they come across, whether that's plant, whether that's animal. Millipedes and snails do the same thing. Down there, you've got a woodlouse. Woodlice are really good at eating decaying wood and plant matter, and all of these things are really important because they break down the molecules very, very small, and then the bits that they don't eat are then digested by bacteria. So that is the recycling cycle. We can use the recycling cycle for useful things to make fuels. And an example of this is a biogas generator. What is a biogas generator? Well, it makes gas from living stuff. So what we do, we get animal manure, so we get waste, and we use cows, pigs, sheep, you name it. But animal waste, manure, and that goes into a biogas generator. A biogas generator is just an underground container which has lots of decomposing bacteria. They anaerobically decompose that, and that releases a gas called methane. And the methane can be used as a fuel for cooking or for heating or whatever. But again, we have a cycle here because that methane is burnt, it produces carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is then photosynthesized, which gets absorbed by plants, which is then eaten by the animal, and the waste goes on here. So the decay cycle isn't just dead animals and dead plants being recycled, it's their waste, it's their excrement. So that's why the recycling cycle is very important. Having detritivores, having decomposers, stops our planet being covered with dead stuff and poo. And neither of those two things will be much fun. So, your task, guys, is this. I want you to produce a resource to show the decay cycle. You can do whatever you want. You can do a poster, a worksheet, a leaflet, you can do revision questions, you could do a video, you could do a TikTok, you could write a gangster rap. I really don't mind. Right, as long as it covers these things. You must have a definition for a decomposer and a detritivore. It's probably not a bad idea if you have an example. Give an example of 2 things that are recycled. I've definitely mentioned 2 things that have been recycled. You want to get the equation for photosynthesis in there. Bear in mind that the gases from this are recycled back through, and explain why the decay cycle is important. If you do that and then ping me that resource via email, that'd be great. If you send me a TikTok, I've genuinely no idea how I'll watch that because I don't understand what TikTok is. But if you do me a worksheet or a leaflet or a PowerPoint or a Word document or something like that, I can manage most of them. Okay, guys, so that's what I want you to do. This is the end of our little bit of biology, but that's it really. How do we recycle stuff? Water is recycled. Carbon is recycled, and the decay process is a very important part of that. In reality, the decay process is a bit more complicated because it recycles nitrogen and all sorts, but our spec doesn't touch that, so nor shall we. Crack on with it, ladies and gents, have fun with it, and I'll hopefully see you all soon. Take care.